Hi, and welcome to session 2 of our Eat Well series. Oh my goodness, this is going to be so fun. You know, we're taking the whole of this series to really look at food, right? It turns out when you go through the Bible, there's just so much talk about eating and food and gardens. That's why we've called it a food gospel analogy, because the Bible uses food as an analogy for life and the good news of Jesus Christ. But let's get right into session 2. It's called faithful. What you have to realize is when the Bible talks about agriculture and gardens back in those days, it's actually a very different picture from agriculture today. We have come a long way and things have really changed. Let me give you a quick picture. Imagine today's modern agriculture where we're trying to feed billions of people. What happens is they'll take a plot of land and clear it completely, right? So whatever God put there initially, the trees that were there, the shrubs, whatever, they just completely clear it. And then to make sure that it's a completely blank slate, usually what happens is they'll put pesticides in there and really chemically blast, I guess, the land, so much so that nothing is left alive on it. So it's a neutral ground. All the germs, all the worms and things like that, all gone. Then what happens is, to get the maximum yield from the land, usually what will happen is these big companies will take a proprietary soil with specially formulated chemicals and put it as a topsoil ahead of the agriculture planting. Then go in the seeds, then go in, all of the different things. And then, because there's such a large amount of land, I guess, you can't watch each one closely. So regularly, they'll have to do pest management, right? So pesticides will go through. And then it gets harvested and the like. But what you have to understand is when the Bible was talking about agriculture and gardening, that was not what was happening. They took care of their land. It's a little bit like this theologian that I was reading, who explains that in his own garden, he decided to plant strawberries for his family. And so he, being an avid gardener, thought, hey, I'm just going to plant these strawberries. He put his own natural fertilizer in there because he wants the best for his children, right? They're going to play around with it, they're going to eat the strawberry after they grow it. And then pretty soon, as the strawberries were growing, he noticed that the slugs were coming out. Do you know what he did? He went to the Bunnings and looked through their pesticide section. And because he is a bit of a nutritionist, he's a bit of a chemist, he looked at the labels of the pesticides and discovered, oh my goodness, they're so toxic. And he actually ended up not using any of the chemical pesticides in the strawberry that he was planting in his own backyard. And it made him think. So he ended up, putting netting over the strawberries, watching over the slugs, managing it really kind of carefully. But it made him think, why is it we would go to a supermarket and just buy food and we don't even know how it's been prepared, what the land was doing over there, but when it's our own backyard and we're watching the food that we grow, we think twice about how we would grow it and what we would do. I think it's because when we pay close attention to the food we eat, we realize that there is a link between what we put in the food we eat versus what we put in our body. There's a link that between those two things. In fact, the Bible talks about this in terms of faithfulness and fidelity. That means everything is we have to be faithful. Everything is linked to each other. The opposite of faithfulness is a word that's called, I'm just going to use the word called divorce, right? And today in our modern society, there is a divorce between things that are supposed to go together. We're supposed to be looking after the land that God has given us. And we've, at some level, with a focus on consumption, focus on cheap food and quick produce, we've moved towards divorcing how the food was prepared or made to how it is consumed. Eating is not just consumption. Eating is supposed to connect us, as we talked about in our last session. It's supposed to connect us to the world around us. I think the same can be said about modern church and spiritual food. You see, we're not supposed to, as Christians, just go to church and just get spiritual food and not care how it was prepared, not care, how it was done, and just sort of consume it as if we just need spiritual food every day. We were supposed to actually pay attention to how spiritual food is grown and nurtured in our lives. And I think you'll find that if you start reading the Bible yourself, if you start preparing your spiritual meals yourself, you'll be more careful what you put in it. If you are the one leading devotion for your family, for your children, your kids, you'll be a little bit more careful what it is that you're putting into their spiritual lives, versus just randomly sending your kid to Sunday school or youth group. And that's not to say Sunday school and youth group are bad. It's just if we would pay closer attention to that link, and if we don't divorce away the preparation of spiritual food away from its consumption, I think you'll find that we will get closer to the kind of life that God intended. One of the things that sin does is it divorces us, right? Sin is the great separator. And I think it's actually really sinful for us to live a life that does not carry the kind of relationships that God has. Sin is the breaking up of things that God has put together, just like us and Him. I love this quote, actually. It goes like this. It's from an ancient Sufi saying. It says this: "You think because you understand one, you must also understand two, because one and one make two. But you must also understand the word and." What it means is just knowing one and then one is not enough. You need to know how one and one go together to make two. Just getting spiritual food from church in and of itself is not enough. That's why we have so many Christians that grow up their whole life at church and they never mature. I think if we paid attention to how we are growing our food, just like the person who grows a strawberry at home, we're careful what we put into it, we're careful how we nurture it, I think we will get into the kind of relationship with God, with spiritual food that He intended. Proverbs 28:20 says, "A faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished." What it means is, don't take shortcuts. Be faithful in how you're going to prepare your food. Are you a person who nurtures what you eat, or are you just consuming? That's what we're going to talk about today.